I never imagined that the most humiliating moment of my life would happen on someone else's wedding day. The dress had arrived just 3 days before. A soft rose gold satin gown with subtle beading around the waist and a flowy A-line cut that made me feel, for once, elegant. I'd saved for months to buy it. It was my gift to myself for standing by my younger sister Emma through her whirlwind engagement, for organizing the bridal shower, managing RSVPs, and handling every little meltdown Mom couldn't deal with. I wasn't the bride. I wasn't even a bridesmaid. I was just the older sister, the background character. But that dress, it was supposed to be my one moment, my quiet way of saying, I'm here too. So when I walked into the living room that morning and saw Emma twirling in my dress, my heart dropped. Emma, what are you doing? I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. She looked up from the mirror, radiant and entirely unbothered. Oh, this? Mom gave it to me. Mine tore during alterations. Don't worry, you can wear one of my old ones. I blinked, as if the room had tilted. No, that's my dress. I paid for it. Mom's voice came from the kitchen, sharp and dismissive. Lena, don't be dramatic. Emma's the bride's sister. She needs to look perfect in the photos. You can borrow something from her closet. Honestly, no one's going to be looking at you. The sting of her words hit deeper than I expected. It wasn't just about a dress. It was about everything. The years of being the responsible one, the reliable one, the invisible one, the one who was always expected to give way because Emma had a recital, or Emma had a date, or Emma couldn't handle pressure. And now, on a day that wasn't even about me, I was being erased again. I stood frozen as Emma flounced off to take more selfies, the satin glinting under the sunlight. My satin. My fists clenched. I wanted to scream, to tear the dress off her, to make someone, anyone, see me. But I didn't. Instead, I turned around, walked upstairs, and began packing my bag. Because that morning, something inside me snapped, and for the first time in my life, I knew I was done. My name is Lena Morgan, and for 27 years, I've been the dependable daughter, the one who doesn't cause problems, the one who picks up the pieces after everyone else drops them. I work as an executive assistant at a mid-sized publishing firm downtown. It's not glamorous, but I'm good at it. Organized, quiet, invisible, just how my family always liked me. Growing up, it wasn't obvious that there was a favorite. Not at first, but over time, the signs added up. When I was 11 and Emma was 8, she accidentally broke Mom's favorite vase while playing tag. I got grounded for not watching her. At 14, I missed the school field trip because Emma had a cold, and Mom needed help babysitting. My teacher said I could go if a parent signed the waiver. Mom never did. Little things, over and over. A pattern. I was the fallback plan, the second thought. If something had to be sacrificed, it was me. If someone had to clean up, it was me. Always me. When I got accepted to a competitive out-of-state college on a partial scholarship, I was over the moon. I remember sitting at the dinner table, letter in hand, heart pounding. I barely finished reading before Mom sighed and said, "That's nice, honey, but who's going to help around here if you leave?" That fall, I enrolled in a local community college. Emma had just started high school, and apparently, she really needed emotional stability at home. I told myself I was being mature, selfless, but I never forgot how easily my future became optional. Emma, meanwhile, was a whirlwind of attention. Dance competitions, art showcases, is constant social drama. When she got accepted to NYU, my parents threw a party. When I got promoted at work last year, I got a thumbs up from Dad and a distracted, "That's great, sweetie," from Mom while she scrolled through Facebook. I used to think if I just kept giving, they'd notice me. If I worked hard enough, stayed quiet enough, kept helping, they'd eventually say, "Thank you, Lena. We're proud of you." But that day never came. Instead, I became the family's invisible backbone, Emma's unofficial assistant, Mom's emotional dumping ground, Dad's tech support. No one ever asked how I was doing. No one ever offered help. And now, after months of wedding planning, I had done practically single-handedly. Color palettes, guest lists, venue scouting, even drafting the wedding speech for the maid of honor Emma couldn't bother to write. I was told I could wear one of her hand-me-downs and stay out of the pictures if you're not smiling. That morning, as I packed my overnight bag, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I felt hollow. There were no birthday parties in my childhood that I could remember clearly. No framed photos of just me on the hallway wall. At family dinners, I was the one serving plates while Emma talked about her latest drama. At holidays, I was the one cleaning up while everyone else opened gifts. I glanced at the clock. Emma's rehearsal dinner was in 6 hours. I had every reason to be there. I'd helped pay for it. And yet, I zipped up my bag, pulled out my phone, and sent one message. "I'm not coming. Please don't contact me." Then I turned it off. I didn't know exactly where I was going yet, but I knew one thing. I wasn't going to be part of a story where I was always cast as the supporting character. I didn't go far that day. I booked a cheap hotel room with the little emergency money I kept in an envelope tucked inside an old hardcover book, one of the few things I had learned to keep hidden. Years of watching money vanish from my bank account without explanation had taught me that some boundaries need to be physical, tangible. That evening, I sat on the stiff mattress, staring at the ceiling, letting the silence settle in. My phone stayed off. My bag was still half packed. I hadn't even brought pajamas, just the dress I didn't get to wear and a half-eaten protein bar from my purse. And the memories came rushing in. I remembered my 12th birthday. I had begged for a trip to the aquarium. Nothing fancy, just something different. But that morning, Emma had a fever. Nothing serious, just a mild cold. But Mom said, it's not fair to go without her. So we stayed home. I made my own cake from a box. No candles. I remembered when Grandma left me $500 in her will for books and education. I was 16. I never saw the money. Months later, Emma showed up with a new iPad for school. "Mom and Dad said it's an investment in my future," she'd beamed. I didn't ask. Didn't. I already knew. Senior year of high school, I got a part-time job at the local library. My first paycheck. I planned to buy a used camera I'd been eyeing for months. But Emma needed new shoes for a dance showcase, and we're a family, Lena. We all contribute when someone needs help. Mom smiled as she said it, her tone leaving no room for objection. And so I gave. Again, and again, and again. By the time I graduated from college, after transferring schools twice to accommodate family needs, I had become numb to it. I didn't even attend my own graduation ceremony. Emma had a last-minute emergency. Her boyfriend broke up with her before prom. Mom said she needed support. So I stayed home. I remember once, during my brief stint at a university out of town, 6 months before I was forced to drop out due to family obligations, I had called home after getting an A on a presentation I'd worked weeks on. I was bursting with pride, desperate to hear someone say, "I'm proud of you." Proud. But when Mom picked up, the first thing she said was, "Emma's having a rough week. Can you call her?" Not, "How are you?" Not, "Tell me everything." Just redirect, as always. I had lived my entire life in service of someone else's comfort. Not because I was selfless, but because I was taught that my worth was measured by how easily I disappeared. And I had become so good at it, being small, quiet, accommodating, that I didn't realize how deeply it had hollowed me out. Until now. Until a dress. Until a sentence, "No one's going to be looking at you." Until I finally heard the truth behind their smiles, that I was only ever valued when I wasn't seen. But something in me was changing. Maybe it was the silence of the room. Maybe it was the growing ache of years buried beneath fake smiles and polite obedience. Maybe it was the realization that if I didn't walk away now, I never would. I sat up slowly, took out a notebook from my bag, and for the first time in a long time, I started writing it all down. Not for them, for me. Because if no one else had been keeping track of what I lost, I would. And if I was going to rebuild myself from the ruins, I had to start by naming every brick they'd taken from me. The hotel had weak Wi-Fi and a broken vending machine, but it gave me space. Space to think, space to breathe, space to unravel. It was on the second morning, after a fitful night of half-sleep and dreams filled with distant laughter, that I finally turned my phone back on. 37 missed calls, over 60 text messages. Most were from Mom, a few from Emma, none from Dad. They ranged from guilt-tripping, "You embarrassed the family, Lena." To panic, "Please come back, we need to talk." I scrolled until I reached one from an unknown number. It read, "Hi, this is Alan. Just wanted to confirm the repayment schedule for the 10K loan you agreed to co-sign. First installment is due next week. Call me if you have questions." I stared at it, heart pounding. Loan? I hadn't co-signed anything. I hadn't applied for anything. My credit history was clean. Or so I thought. I called the number, hands shaking. Alan answered on the second ring. "Hey, Lena, thanks for getting back. Your mom said you were the primary contact since the funds were for you." "For me?" My voice cracked. "What exactly did she tell you?" He hesitated. "That you were starting a home business. Wedding coordination, I believe. She said you needed fast funding for materials and vendor deposits. You signed the documents through DocuSign last month." My throat tightened. "Can you email me those documents?" Of course. 5 minutes later, the email arrived. There it was, my full name, social security number, address, a digital signature. I knew instantly it wasn't mine. Not the way I signed, not even close. Attached was the transfer confirmation, $10,000 wired directly to my mother's account. Memo line, "Emma's wedding expenses." My stomach turned. This wasn't just favoritism. This was fraud. I checked my credit score. It had dropped 78 points in 2 weeks. A new line of credit, a personal loan opened in my name, and another inquiry pending. I felt like the floor beneath me had cracked open. They didn't just take my dress, they took my name. I printed everything from the hotel's business center, the loan docs, the credit report, the bank transfer. Then I walked to the nearest pharmacy, bought a folder, and started building my own case. For the first time in years, I wasn't shrinking. I was documenting. Later that night, I called Olivia, my best friend since college. We hadn't spoken much in recent months. Life had pulled us in different directions, but when I told her everything, she didn't hesitate. "Come stay with me," she said. "Tonight. My roommate's out of town and you need a safe place." I packed quietly. Not because I was scared, but because I was boiling. On the Uber ride to Olivia's apartment, I stared out the window and thought about all the years they told me I was too sensitive, too serious, too selfish when I pushed back, all while using my account like their private ATM. They hadn't just ignored me, they'd exploited me, and now they were scrambling to patch up a mess they created, with my name on the contract. At Olivia's, I showed her the folder. Her eyes widened. "Lena, this is criminal." "I know," I said flatly. "And I'm not letting them get away with it." She sat beside me in silence for a moment, then reached for my hand. "So what's your plan?" I stared down at the papers, at the damage, at the proof. "I'm going home," I said. "To talk?" "No," I said, my voice steady. "To collect, and to leave something behind they can't ignore." Because this time, I wasn't just walking away. I was drawing a line in ink. We waited until after midnight. Olivia's apartment was quiet, except for the soft hum of the refrigerator and the occasional creak of pipes in the walls. I had never been the type to sneak around, to plan retaliation. But this wasn't about revenge. This was about clarity. This was about truth. My plan was simple: return home, gather the last of my important belongings, and leave behind a folder that would make it impossible for them to pretend they didn't know what they had done. "Are you sure about this?" Olivia asked as I zipped up my hoodie. I nodded. "If I don't do it now, they'll just spin it. Again, they'll say I overreacted, that it was a misunderstanding. But not this time. This time, I leave proof." We parked 2 blocks away and walked the rest of the way under the cover of streetlights. My childhood home looked the same as always, modest, tidy, deceptively normal. But to me, it felt like a stage where I'd played a part for too long. The key still worked. I slipped inside as quietly as I could. The house smelled like lavender and lemon cleaner, just like it always did before guests arrived. Emma's wedding was 3 days away. They were probably preparing to host relatives. Cleaning, decorating, hiding the cracks. I moved quickly. My room was still the same, neutral tones, bare walls. Everything always neat, because clutter was disrespectful, Mom used to say. But what I saw next nearly stopped me in my tracks. The closet door was open, my shelves half empty, my books stacked in boxes I hadn't packed, and there, laid out neatly on the bed, were my old shoes, jewelry, and a few pieces of clothing I'd bought for work. My mother had clearly started redistributing my things like I was gone for good, like I had never mattered. I opened the loose floorboard beneath my desk and retrieved the small fireproof box I had kept hidden for years. Inside was my passport, birth certificate, and a flash drive with backups of my personal files, documents I didn't trust anyone else to keep safe. I gathered my things in silence, methodically. A few photo albums, my resume folder, the hand-knit scarf from my late grandmother. The rest could burn, for all I cared. Then I pulled out the folder I'd assembled. I placed it right in the center of the kitchen table, on top of the doily Mom always used for guests. The folder was thick, over 50 pages of bank statements, loan documents, identity theft evidence, and a timeline of financial irregularities starting from the day I turned 18. On the front, I taped a simple note in my handwriting. "You always told me family meant sacrifice. I just didn't realize you meant mine. Lena." Then I added one final item, a printed copy of a police report, unsigned but filed, documenting suspected identity theft and financial fraud. I hadn't pressed charges yet, but I wanted them to know I could. I took one last look around the kitchen. This had been the room where I learned to bake, where I'd done my homework, where we used to carve pumpkins every Halloween. It was also the room where I had been told, year after year, to put Emma first. Now it was where I left the truth. I stepped outside, into the cool night air. The sky was just beginning to fade from black to that indigo shade that comes before dawn. It felt symbolic somehow, like the end of a long, suffocating night. When I got back to Olivia's, she was still awake, waiting by the window. "Did you do it?" she asked. I nodded, placing the empty folder back in my bag. "They'll find it in the morning." And then I looked at her, feeling something I hadn't felt in years: resolve. Then they'll finally have to see me. Not as a burden, not as background, but as someone they can't ignore anymore. Because for the first time, I wasn't asking for their approval. I was demanding accountability. They found the folder at 6:43 a.m. I know this because my phone exploded with vibrations all at once, after being off all night. I had barely managed to fall asleep on Olivia's couch when the barrage began. Texts, missed calls, voicemails stacked on top of each other like an avalanche of guilt and denial. The first voicemail was from Mom. Her voice was sharp, brittle, on the edge of tears. "Lena, what is this? What did you leave on the table? Your father is furious. You can't just accuse us of things like this. Call me back immediately." The second was Dad, less emotional, more threatening. "You've gone too far. This is slander. I don't know who filled your head with this crap, but you better fix it before you burn every bridge you've got left." Then Emma. "Lena, what did you do? Mom's crying, Dad's yelling. They think you're going to sue them, are you? Please talk to me." I didn't reply. Instead, I sat quietly in Olivia's kitchen, a mug of coffee growing cold in my hands as I listened to each message. The desperation in their voices didn't come from remorse. It came from fear of exposure, fear of consequences. And they should be afraid. By 9 a.m., the messages changed tone. First came Dad again, now calm, almost reasonable. "Okay, let's just talk this through, Lena. We're family. This can be worked out. We'll figure out the money thing. You don't need to involve the police." Then Mom. "Sweetheart, I know you feel hurt, but families go through rough patches. That doesn't mean we destroy each other." I hadn't destroyed anything. I'd simply stopped pretending. At noon, Olivia's doorbell rang. She peeked through the peephole and turned to me with wide eyes. "It's your parents." My chest tightened. "Don't open it." Too late. A knock followed, then another, louder this time. "Lena!" Mom's voice called out, muffled but unmistakable. "We just want to talk. Please." Then Dad. "You owe us that much. After everything we've done for you." I didn't respond. I didn't move. Olivia stood beside me like a sentry. "Do you want me to call the police?" she whispered. I hesitated. Before I could answer, the doorbell rang again, this time faster, more aggressive. That was enough. I stepped forward, pulled the door open just a crack, and stared into the faces of two people I barely recognized. Mom's eyes were red, her mascara smudged. Dad looked more angry than confused, as if he couldn't comprehend why I wasn't bowing my head in shame. "You have 5 minutes," I said coldly. "No yelling, no guilt trips. And if either of you lies, I'm done." They stepped inside. The silence was thick. "What is this, Lena?" Mom asked first, holding up the folder like it was poison. "How could you put this together? How could you accuse your own family of theft?" "Because it's true," I said. "And you know it." Dad scoffed. "That's nonsense. We never stole anything. Everything we did was for the family." "For the family?" I repeated, stepping closer. "Was it for the family when you opened a $10,000 loan in my name without asking? When you sold my camera, my books, my college fund piece by piece and told me it was for Emma's future? Or when you made me feel guilty for ever wanting something for myself?" They said nothing. "Do you even realize what you've done to me?" I continued. "What it's like to never be seen, never be celebrated, only used when something needs fixing or funding. I didn't walk away from this family. You pushed me out, over and over, until I finally stopped coming back." Mom started crying. "We didn't mean, Lena, it wasn't like that. You're blowing this out of proportion." "No," I said firmly. "I've spent my whole life minimizing. This is proportionate." Dad's voice turned cold. "If you're planning to go public with this or take legal action, just know you'll be hurting more than us. You'll humiliate this entire family." I looked him in the eyes. "Then maybe this family needs to be humbled." The silence that followed felt endless. Finally, I stepped back and opened the door. "You can go now." Mom sobbed something incoherent. Dad didn't speak. They left without another word. As the door clicked shut, I felt my legs give out. Olivia caught me before I collapsed fully to the floor. "I can't believe I said all of that," I whispered, trembling. She squeezed my shoulder. "I can. I've been waiting years for you to." And in that moment, I realized something profound. Telling the truth doesn't always fix things, but it finally sets you free. That night, after everything, I fell asleep on Olivia's pull-out couch without even realizing I'd closed my eyes. I was emotionally exhausted, drained in a way that no amount of rest could truly repair. But just past dawn, my phone buzzed again. Not from Mom, not from Dad. From her, Grandma Evelyn. I blinked at the name on the screen for a few seconds before answering. My voice was hoarse. "Grandma?" "Lena, sweetheart," she said, her tone calm but firm. "I just spoke with your father. He told me a very edited version of what happened. I want your side, now." I hadn't cried during the confrontation, hadn't broken when Dad threatened me, but the sound of her voice, the only adult in my family who had ever looked me in the eye and said, "You're enough just as you are," made the tears fall before I could stop them. "Grandma, they opened a loan in my name. They've been taking money from me for years, gaslighting me, controlling everything. And when I finally stood up for myself, they acted like I was the problem." "I believe you," she said immediately. "I always have. That's why I need you to meet me this afternoon. I'm flying in." "What?" "I'm staying with Aunt May for the week, but I've already asked her to drive me to Olivia's as soon as I land. We need to talk. In person." True to her word, by 3 o'clock p.m., Grandma Evelyn was sitting at Olivia's kitchen table, with her signature pressed blouse and a leather folder in her lap. Her gray hair was pinned into its usual neat twist, but her eyes had more fire than I'd seen in years. "I should have stepped in sooner," she said, sighing, "but I wanted to believe your parents were doing their best." She opened the folder and slid a few documents across the table. I scanned them: bank records, trust documents, beneficiary information, legal signatures from nearly 20 years ago. "This is my college fund?" "Yes," she said. "When you and Emma were born, your grandfather set up equal education trusts for both of you. $25,000 each. It was supposed to grow with interest. You were both to be told when you turned 18. My fingers shook. I never knew. Dad said there wasn't anything left, that the market had crashed, or that I had to apply for loans. Lena, she said gently, they drained yours to pay for Emma's first 2 years at NYU, after she already used her own. Your father told the trustees you weren't responsible enough to manage the account yourself. And they believed him? He was listed as the executor. We trusted him. But when I saw the copy of your police report, I started digging. She pulled out one last document, a signed affidavit revoking Dad's authority as trustee over all remaining family funds. I filed this yesterday, Grandma said. Emma's trust is frozen. Yours will be restored as much as possible. There may even be more, depending on what we recover. But I wanted you to hear it from me. I didn't know what to say. I just stared at the table, at the years of betrayal printed in black ink. It was more than money. It was the lie of it all. The fact that they'd let me believe I was a burden while quietly cashing in on everything I'd never had. I want you to come live with me for a while, Grandma said. You need time to rebuild and protection. I can't believe any of this, I whispered. It's like it was never just favoritism, it was theft. It was manipulation. Grandma reached across the table and held my hand. It wasn't your fault, and it's not your job to protect them anymore. Outside the window, a soft spring breeze rustled the trees lining the street. For the first time in days, maybe in years, I felt something strange and unfamiliar stir in my chest. Hope. Because maybe, just maybe, I wasn't alone anymore. Living with Grandma Evelyn felt like breathing fresh air after years of holding my breath. Her small bungalow sat at the edge of town, tucked between rose bushes and quiet neighbors who waved when you walked by. The guest room was simple, light blue walls, a vintage desk, a window that overlooked her garden. But it felt like safety, like permission to rest. On my first morning there, I slept until nearly 10. When I came downstairs, Grandma had already made tea and printed a checklist with the title in bold, Lena's Recovery Plan. It was ridiculous. It was perfect. First things first, she said, handing me a bowl of oatmeal. We protect what's left. She had already connected me with a financial advisor, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Miriam, who barely blinked at the mess I laid out. You're not the first person to be financially exploited by their own family, she said, tapping her pen against a folder. And sadly, you won't be the last. Under her guidance, we froze my credit, opened new bank accounts, and began untangling the wreckage of the $10,000 loan. I filed a formal dispute. We started building a case for potential restitution. It felt overwhelming, but it also felt like movement, like I wasn't stuck anymore. While the legal process churned forward, I turned my attention to work. I couldn't go back to being just someone's assistant, not anymore. But bills still needed paying, and pride didn't cancel rent. Richard, my old manager at the publishing firm, had reached out after Olivia told him everything. We're opening a new digital marketing division, he said over the phone. You were always detail-oriented. Want to try something new? I almost cried. A week later, I started part-time, remote, flexible hours, training included. For the first time, my work felt like something I chose, not something I had to endure. And the people around me, they showed up in ways I hadn't expected. Olivia dropped off frozen meals. Her roommate Tara gave me access to her Adobe subscription so I could redesign my resume. Even Emma texted one night. I'm sorry. For all of it, I didn't know. But now I do. I didn't respond right away. I needed more than words. But something in me softened. Grandma was the steady anchor through it all. Every evening, she'd sit beside me as I sifted through years of papers, highlighting every transfer, every suspicious transaction. She never told me to let it go or move on. She just listened. One night, as I sat in the living room floor surrounded by old bank statements and unopened mail, she placed a hand on my shoulder. You're not just rebuilding your finances, sweetheart, she said. You're rebuilding your sense of self. And brick by brick, it's already happening. I looked around at the organized piles, the documents neatly labeled, the calendar on the wall filled with upcoming court deadlines, job milestones, and even a lunch date with a college friend I hadn't seen in years. She was right. It was slow. It was exhausting. But it was happening. And this time, every step forward belonged to me. It was supposed to be the wedding of the year. The venue was booked, the guest list finalized, and the centerpieces, lavender and cream roses, had arrived at the Morgan house in bulk. But the day before the rehearsal dinner, I got a message from Emma that read only, "Can we talk, please?" I stared at the screen, torn. A month ago, I would have ignored it, but something in her tone felt different, less defensive, more like a real person, stripped of the usual smugness. I met her at a quiet cafe near Grandma's place. She was already there, dressed in jeans and an oversized hoodie. No makeup, no entourage, no sparkle. When she looked up, her eyes were red and swollen. "I called off the wedding," she said before I could even sit down. I blinked. "What?" "I called it off last night. I told Mom and Dad this morning. It's over." I sat down slowly, unsure what to say. She took a deep breath. "Turns out Jake's been hiding some serious debt. I found out by accident. He left an email open on my laptop. Credit card bills, gambling sites, unpaid taxes. When I confronted him, he told me he was hoping Dad would help clean it up." I didn't say anything. I just let her talk. "That's when it hit me," she continued. "I've never made a real decision in my life. Not one that was truly mine. It's always been about what Mom and Dad want, what looks good, what feels right for the family brand." Her voice cracked. "And the worst part? I didn't even ask where the money came from for this wedding. I just assumed it was there. That someone, you, would figure it out like always." Emma wiped her face with a napkin. "I saw what you left on the kitchen table. The folder, the report, the numbers. Lena? I didn't know. I truly didn't know." I believed her. Not because she was crying, but because for the first time she wasn't trying to justify it. "I've been selfish," she said, staring down at her coffee. "But they made me that way. They treated me like porcelain and you like steel, and I just went along with it." I took a long breath. "That's the problem. You didn't have to be the villain, but you sure didn't mind benefiting from one." "I know," she whispered. We sat in silence for a while. Then she reached into her purse and pulled out an envelope. "I know this doesn't fix everything," she said, sliding it across the table. "But it's a start." Inside was $2,000 in cash and a note. "I'm working now. Real job, real hours. I'm paying you back piece by piece, because you don't deserve to carry the weight for all of us." For a moment, I didn't know whether to cry or laugh, but instead, I just nodded, because this time she wasn't trying to win me over. She was trying to grow up. And maybe, for the first time in our lives, we were finally meeting as equals. 1 year later, I stood in the kitchen of my own apartment, icing a homemade cake with shaky hands and a full heart. The space wasn't fancy, just a cozy 2-bedroom in a quiet part of the city. But it was mine. The lease had my name on it. The bills came to my mailbox. The furniture wasn't a hand-me-down or a favor. It was a collection of quiet choices that finally reflected me. Outside, a spring breeze fluttered through the curtains. Inside, the table was set for 6. Grandma Evelyn, Olivia, Richard, my former manager turned friend, Emma, and 2 coworkers from the marketing team I had officially joined full-time last month. This wasn't just a birthday dinner. It was the first time I had ever truly celebrated myself. When the doorbell rang, I opened it to find Emma standing there, holding a plain white envelope and wearing the softest expression I'd ever seen on her face. "I saved up," she said, handing it to me. "It took a while, but it's all there." Inside was a check for $6,000, the exact amount Dad once demanded I pay for her tuition. "I didn't do this to impress you," Emma said quickly. "I did it because I finally understand what you carried, and I'm sorry I let it go on for so long." I didn't need the money, not anymore. But I took the envelope, walked over to the fireproof lockbox I now kept by my desk, and placed it inside, not as revenge, but as a record of growth. That night, we laughed, shared stories, and toasted to second chances. Grandma raised her glass and said, "To Lena, for choosing herself finally, and for showing us what strength really looks like." And for once, I didn't feel like I was in the background. I felt seen. After everyone left and the kitchen was quiet again, I stepped out onto the small balcony. The city lights shimmered below, and I wrapped my cardigan tighter around my shoulders. So much had changed. Dad and I still weren't speaking. He refused to acknowledge the financial harm, claiming I had embarrassed the family. Mom occasionally sent birthday cards signed, "Love you always," but never mentioned the past. I'd drawn boundaries, firm ones, and I kept them. Because healing wasn't about revenge, it was about peace. It was about building a life where I didn't need anyone's permission to be whole. Behind me, Emma walked onto the balcony with 2 mugs of tea. She'd cut her hair short a few months ago. Symbolic, she said, of leaving behind the version of herself molded by our parents. We sipped in silence. Then she looked at me and said, "Do you ever think about what would have happened if Dad never sent that text about your laptop?" I smiled. "Yeah, I probably would have kept shrinking until there was nothing left of me." She nodded slowly. "I'm glad you didn't." "So am I." As we sat there, side by side under the stars, I realized something. Some stories don't end with thunder or fireworks. Some just end with 2 sisters sitting in the quiet, finally on the same side of the table. And sometimes, that's more than enough. If you've ever been the quiet one, the overlooked one, the overlooked, the one who gave and gave until there was nothing left for yourself, then maybe like Lena, you understand this truth. Sometimes it takes being pushed too far to finally stand up. And sometimes walking away from the people who should have protected you is the first step toward protecting yourself. This wasn't just a story about a stolen laptop or a canceled wedding. It was about reclaiming identity, about breaking generational patterns, and about learning that love without respect isn't love, it's control. If this story touched something in you, you're not alone. There are thousands of people quietly rebuilding after family betrayal, thousands learning that it's okay to draw boundaries, even with blood. So if you're still healing, still finding your voice, or still wondering if it's okay to choose you, it is. It always has been. We want to hear from you. Have you ever had to set boundaries with someone you love? Have you ever been the one who stayed quiet for too long? Share your story in the comments. You never know who needs to hear it. If this video resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss a story about strength, truth, and emotional justice. Thank you for watching. And remember, sometimes the most powerful thing you can say is, "No more." And the bravest thing you can do is begin and